Hello, I'm Walter Cronkite, and I've been sailing the waters of Chesapeake Bay for a long time now, and I know that it's nothing less than a national treasure. But now it is the focus of a great experiment, an unprecedented attempt to reverse the decline of its natural resources. We've made some headway, but millions of new citizens are flooding the Bay region, and it's becoming clear that business as usual will not restore the Chesapeake. What you're about to see is a fundamental rethinking of Chesapeake Bay, a dynamic new view of how we must act if we're going to save the Bay.
Bulletin, special marine warning. The National Weather Service in Washington.
National Weather Service in Baltimore has issued a special marine warning effective.
And there should be periods of rain as low pressure develops along the front over central Virginia. Strong cold front will move through the listing area tonight. Ahead of the front, there will be the risk of showers.
The forecast for the Hampton Road cities, the lower eastern shore, and the remainder of southeast Virginia.
Portions of western and central Pennsylvania, portions of
the
western...
Baltimore area will probably see the first of today's thunderstorms within the next hour.
Hey Jim, looks like the thunderstorm activity is really starting to pop up this afternoon. We have to keep heads up for the tidal Potomac.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty good line of storms now. You're starting to get some really hot areas in there.
That's the edge of the squall line right there. And that's what's bringing this wind to us right now. And if you look down here over South Island, see the clouds streaming out below the big cloud? That's rain.
It could be any summer afternoon. A long, rainy front reaches from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, past the cobbled streets of Old Annapolis, into the salt marshes of Tidewater, Virginia. Across political boundaries and across seasons, it is the rain that washes through our lives and connects us with Chesapeake Bay. What we think of as the Bay is but a small part of a vast gathering basin, a watershed for rain spanning 64,000 square miles, a home to some 15 million people. If we think of the Bay's main stem as the trunk of a tree, then its roots are rivers, a web of water embracing the earth, a life support system. For just as a tree draws nourishment from the soil, the Bay also, for better or worse, is fed by the land. The Potomac gathers the runoff from 4 states and 4 million people. The lush banks of the Pocomoke crease the eastern shore. The mighty Susquehanna, its fingers reach as far as New York State and touch 10,000 farms. From Harrisburg to Harper's Ferry, through forests of hemlock and pine, and forests of concrete and steel, tributaries flow toward the Bay carrying a signature of the lands they drain. Chesapeake Bay once thrived on this nourishment from the land. Chesapeake, once a balance of land and water, of nutrient and growth, of give and take. Chesapeake, the great balancing act, is headed for a fall.
Certainly all ecosystems, and aquatic ecosystems in particular, are rather resilient. They are able to accommodate some nutrient input. They are able to accommodate some removal of resources. But to all these things, there is a limit.
Is the problem really that bad? Couldn't we wait until I've sold off my farm and developed it and given the money to my kids and then worry about protecting the watershed? Do we have to do it right now? And the answer, of course, is yeah, we really do have to do it right now, because by every measure, we're at a critical point in terms of the health of the bay. And while it's very vigorous and capable of sustaining itself and very strong, we are also very strong. And as human beings, we have pushed the bay to its limit.
Okay, hold on, 5 more feet, okay? I want to get a seahorse. See, I'm holding it by the back fin there. You can pinch the other one, right on the joint, right on the joint. Compare the pipefish to the grass. What are the similarities?
Well, he has a long snout and it's fatter, but they're also like the same murky color.
Yeah, the same color. So what does the grass do for the fish?
The grass camouflages.
It camouflages it. And what do fish need to survive?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. And what are the grasses doing for the fish?
They produce oxygen.
They're producing oxygen, right? You think on a real sunny day they produce a lot of oxygen?
Kids are always so amazed to find out how connected everything is here. You know, when they go through the grasses and they find fish, and then they see a great blue heron standing in the same grasses that they walked in, and they see it catching the same fish. Every part of the system needs every other part of the system. Everything's connected.
This is the essence of the marsh.
All right, go ahead.
Yep, you can slide right off the shell, just like an oyster. Tasty?
Delicious.
That's when they begin to see that the things they do back home in Richmond or Baltimore or D.C., the things in their daily life affect the bay.
The clam's down in the hole there, and it's filtering it right through its system. It's filtering all the plankton. Now, this is a live one.
Wow! Hey, crab!
I see crabs.
Crab!
Look at all those crabs.
The bay is an ecosystem, a complex web of land, water, and life. An ecosystem thrown out of balance by man. Life in the estuary evolved in harmony with the watershed. But we have redesigned the watershed and harvested the life. Can we ever bring the old bay back? The one with grass and clear water and fish. We want the pristine bay of decades past. Trouble is, we don't live as we lived then.
Boy, what a mess through Townsend on this beltway.
That's where you got the car phone, for a little peace of mind.
Like big shady trees, green lawns.
I think a skylight for the foyer.
Time is a precious commodity.
Would you like paper or plastic?
That's a cheeseburger, a large fry, a large coke. To the second window.
It's easy parking.
Good shopping.
Do it now. We'll leave the light on for you.
Man.
We've been given this gift of the bay, and our job is to ensure that we're able to pass that gift on to our children and our grandchildren. And if we continue business as usual, we're not going to be able to do that.
For decades, business as usual has meant growth. Unprecedented growth in housing, shopping centers and parking lots. Space to store the things we no longer need. But it's not so much our numbers as the way we live. Each person today uses more water, more electricity. He buys and discards more packaging, more chemicals than the average person did 40 years ago. The automobile has shaped our lives and our landscape. Per capita, we own more cars. drive more miles and use more gas than ever. We have sprawled across the Bay region, paving acre after acre. Almost half of the wetlands and 40% of the forests in the watershed have been lost. And predictions are that in the next 30 years, Bay Country will make room for another 3 million people.
Now these driveways, these shopping centers that they have, everything's paved, and gas and oil and rubber and everything in the world. All that stuff is winding up in the river. Years ago, it went back into the ground. The trees and stuff was holding that runoff back.
Adolph Welch has been working on the bay and its tributaries over 50 years. In summer, he can often be found trot-lining for blue crabs in the Patuxent River close to his home.
Oh yes, the river has changed. Seemed like when I was coming along after the first frost, you could walk out on the end of the pier and I would say the water was 5 or 6 feet deep. After first frost, you could see the bottom.
Peering down to net the next crab, Adolph notices more than most. Yes, the murky water in the bay is one of the most striking signs of our changing watershed. Every time we lay bare the soil, rain washes some of that soil away. Sediment from thousands of construction sites and farms around the watershed runs toward the bay. There it clouds the water and chokes off light to aquatic grasses. But that's not all we send downstream. A sea of suburban lawns washed by rain sends fertilizers to the bay. And more comes from sewage treatment plants serving these communities. More than 200 treatment plants now discharge 1.5 billion gallons a day into the bay watershed. Equivalent to the average flow of the Shenandoah River, this sewage remains a major source of pollution. Fertilizer also washes off farmers' fields and manure from feedlots. It all adds up, and it all ends up in the bay. Scientists tell us bay water has too much nutrient. Nutrient pollution is bad because it throws the ecosystem out of balance. It fuels runaway growth of tiny one-celled plants called phytoplankton, a kind of floating algae. All this algae clouds the water. What's worse, as it dies, it uses up oxygen in the water. And that's bad for almost everything else in the food chain.
One of the problems in estuaries is that they are classic nutrient traps. That is to say, the nutrient that goes in the Susquehanna River, in Pennsylvania, for example, that same molecule moves down into the bay and fuels phytoplankton production, but does not flow out of the bay. It simply stays within the system, continuing to stimulate more and more production, more and more oxygen consumption, and altering the ecosystem.
You know, you've got pretty good oxygen at the bottom right now. Ranges are more low salinity. We're right at a borderline of oligohaline to low mesohaline.
And it doesn't stop there. A deadly mix of toxins from crankcase oil to household cleaners and industrial chemicals enters the bay daily. Even our air contributes, laden all too often with industrial and automobile exhaust. Rain washes this pollution out of the air and into the bay. Clearly, harmony with the bay ecosystem is something humans have yet to achieve. Yet, remarkably, the bay still fights back.
Are you ready? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, man.
You feel that? You go up and down. You feel that? It's like a big, big sponge. That's what makes the marsh such a good filter, a good absorber of water, because it's that giant root mass, you know? And when the water comes up, you can just fill into the marsh, and the marsh can absorb all that water.
Oh, cool. look at those. Wow.
The bay has a natural defense against the stresses we place on it. We as ecologists call it its resilience. It's its ability to continue to function even though we're upsetting it. The input of pollutants that come from human activities and from the landscape, many of them are intercepted through the natural environment by the fact that they're trapped in our wetlands. As we've reduced those, in Maryland alone, we've lost about 3/4 of our total wetlands that existed from colonial times. We've reduced the capacity of this whole ecosystem of the Chesapeake Bay, this watershed, to trap and handle those pollutants. Now they are reaching the bay.
In fact, much of the natural bay's shoreline has been radically altered. The same thing is happening along the banks of the tributaries. Until recent times, the bay has had yet another formidable defense against pollution. It is the life beneath the surface.
The bay has biological populations which contribute to its resilience. These populations include the submerged aquatic vegetation around the shallow waters of the bay. This vegetation not only provides habitat and food, but also filters inputs of sediments and nutrients into the bay, which enhance its resilience.
Unfortunately, much of the grass is gone, a victim of murky water blocking out the sun. And as wetlands and underwater grasses disappear, so too are the harvestable resources of the bay. To the Indians, Chesapeake meant Great Shellfish Bay. Almost all of this legendary bounty is gone. Working skipjacks grow scarcer each season. Scientists have only recently discovered how important these oysters were to the bay's ability to withstand pollution.
The filtering capacity of the oyster is enormous. Given the fact that we once had maybe 100 times as many oysters as we do now in the bay, calculations indicate that those populations could pretty well filter the entire volume of the bay in about 4 days.
What we've got in the oyster is a natural vacuum cleaner, an organism that literally removes the phytoplankton from the water column, concentrates it in its biomass, and then that biomass is removed and sold, thus controlling the effect of nutrient inputs into the water column. One of the problems with perception of aquatic systems is that it's invisible. If I go out and take my oyster today, I don't see what damage has been done to that. If, on the other hand, I go into a field and I harvest a field of corn, I get to see the corn has disappeared. In the aquatic system, we don't see that. And so there is a tragedy of the commons. Everybody goes in, takes their striped bass, takes their oyster, and doesn't recognize the effect that it has on the entire ecosystem. And by simply removing that one more oyster, that one more striped bass, we've damaged the system ultimately beyond its ability to recover.
You know, we always talk about the bay as a resource, and we want to measure its value as a resource. We don't do that with human beings. We don't say that the only value a human being has is its value to produce. You are worthwhile because you exist, and because you're part of life, and because you connect with all the rest of us. And I think that's also true of the natural environment, and particularly of the Chesapeake Bay. It has value separate from the value that we place on it in terms of our desire to use it in some way or manipulate it. It is connected, as we all are, in this huge web. Some of the relationships within that web we understand. Some of those relationships we don't understand. We don't really know what happens if we fiddle with one part of the web. We don't know what's going to happen to the other part of the web.
The riddle is this. We want a living bay that provides us with seafood, yet the bay needs these organisms to live. Is the lowly oyster telling us something? Scientists think yes. We must restore the bay's own resilience. we must renew and protect its natural abilities to withstand pollution. We must learn how to live in the web without destroying it. One of the many places in the watershed where these goals are being pursued is the Patuxent River in Maryland. The program of stream monitoring and restoration is one of the longest running and may serve as a bellwether for bay-wide action. Steve Preston is with the U.S. Geological Survey.
We're studying the Patuxent because we want to compile a water quality database that we can use to determine how particular land uses in the watershed affect the quality in the streams. And we're also compiling the database so that we can determine how much of particular constituents, whether they be nutrients or sediment, get transported to the Chesapeake Bay and affect the water quality there.
Data such as these have enabled scientists to develop computer models which predict how water quality in the bay is affected by pollution that comes down the tributaries.
All right, that's the last cross section.
One striking conclusion: water that runs off the land carries the least pollution if that land is forested. Rain which falls on forests slowly filters through the ground and then into the streams. Forest land in a watershed smooths out fluctuations in flow. A stable stream habitat with improved water quality is also good for fish. In contrast, concrete offers no filtering. Chemical pollution and our trash wash unimpeded toward the bay. Even so, year after year, forest land is cleared to serve other needs. Demand for wider, faster roads, new housing and shopping centers continues. All told, we have nibbled away almost half of the forest land which existed in colonial times. These forests are crucial to the bay's own pollution-fighting ability. On average, farmland is 100 times more polluting than forest land. Urban development, 1,000 times worse. Forests are an important buffer between these sources of pollution and waterways to the bay.
You know, in the floodplain of the Patuxent River, there's a wonderful lesson to be learned. We couldn't duplicate this for tens of millions of dollars. This forested floodplain of the river protects the bay. In fact, it may be the critical area of the bay. And more, this is the area that's most threatened. The headwaters of the freshwater rivers of the bay are in trouble. There's development that's encroaching upon them. There's runoff that's polluting them. There's sediment that's choking the streams. We need to wake up and take care of these forested wetlands.
Volunteers hope for better public access and ultimately a wider appreciation of the role forests and wetlands play.
People are somewhat hesitant to head into the swamp. It doesn't get any money, it doesn't pay any taxes. There's all kinds of noxious critters that live out here. There's snakes, there's mosquitoes. People don't warm to wetlands, at least these kind of forested, non-tidal wetlands, very, very well, till you learn about them. This is a real repository for wildlife. You hear warblers singing all around us, the neotropical migrants that came from Central and South America. We take them for granted. You know, they're just birds in the background. But these little birds are traveling thousands of miles and expect to find a home when they wind up here. Critical part of their life cycle is to come here and breed and raise their young and head back in a kind of a timeless rhythm. My dream for the river is to see it in better shape when my kids grow up. That sounds kind of idealistic, perhaps. But by being out here and doing the things that we do, the benefits that we can see are tangible. By preserving these open space lands along the river, by getting people involved to care for them, by doing restoration and reclamation projects, we can see benefits, and we can see benefits throughout the entire bay. We have to wake up to the challenge that's here, or we won't have the bay to enjoy, even in our lifetimes, and it's certainly not going to be the same for our kids.
The bay, of course, has many Patuxents, and restoring the bay, many challenges. The great Shellfish Bay will be saved acre by acre far from her shores. A forest replanted here, a wetland protected there. We must learn how to manage the living resources, the oysters and the aquatic grasses, so they substantially contribute to water quality. Is it too late? Is a robust and resilient bay a thing of the past? This estuary where land and water struggle evolved to withstand stress. If we can revitalize and protect the self-regulating tools of the bay, the wetlands and forests and the inhabitants of the bottom, if we can restore these to a point, then just perhaps the Chesapeake Bay may surprise us.
And look what's underneath it. Look at that. And look at all these fiddler crabs everywhere. And look at this, a turtle egg. See how leathery it is. That's probably from a diamondback terrapin.
As you've seen, there is no quick fix, no pill that we can drop in the bay to cure it. It is all connected, all we do, from watershed to water's bottom. We've got to change, be thriftier in using open space for our houses, less polluting in the ways we grow our food and produce our goods, less wasteful of the energy and water, more conserving of the seafood that we harvest. Now, that doesn't mean a lower quality of life. The alternative to overeating is eating wisely, not going hungry. Moderating our consuming ways can mean a cleaner, clearer bay with more life in it than many of us have ever seen. The choice is ours. We can squander our rich inheritance, or we can restore the bay and pass on its wonder and beauty for generations to come.